The most perhaps well-known version of Singularity, other than the astrophysical one, is the point in time where machines become more intelligent than human beings.
In this video, you are going to learn what the greatest disruptions in the field of finances are and what an exponential mindset is. Kris Østergaard is the co-founder and Chief Learning and Innovation Officer of Singularity University Nordic. With more than 15 years of research experience, he's a sought-after speaker and facilitator primarily around corporate innovation, exponential organizations, and innovation in legacy organizations. He's also a board member and investor to a number of startups, a certified coach, a Lego serious play facilitator, and a frequent writer and blogger.
So if you're a legacy organization, which basically means you're one of the larger, more established companies with decades, sometimes even hundreds of years of background and experience, innovation is a very different animal than if you're a startup, because your systems are much more complex. And that means that when it comes to innovation, the large established companies need to understand that this is not one uniform thing, but in fact they need to innovate in multiple tracks at the same time, depending on how close to their existing core they're innovating and the scope of what they're trying to achieve. Part of it is to do your homework. Abraham Lincoln is credited for saying, if I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe, which means do your analysis, do your homework, be well prepared to create the right innovation strategy before you start executing. We see a lot of innovation theater out there, which basically means that there are a lot of events that wind up standing alone and not being really part of a bigger strategy towards what are we trying to achieve. So there needs to be an innovation strategy. Generally speaking, companies need to be much more ambitious, think much more long-term than they tend to do in regards to innovation, and then they need to think about both augmenting their core, which is where most digital transformation lives, but also mutating the core, which means conduct much more radical experiments as to whom they might become in the long term. Having an exponential mindset is a metaphor for challenging our normal preconceived ways of thinking about what is achievable. So the human brain basically works in a linear fashion. With technology developing at an exponential pace, that means that the gap really between what the human mind, sort of top of mind, thinks is possible and what is actually possible, that gap is widening all the time. So developing an exponential mindset means to explore and understand the technologies that are out there, start experimenting with them and daring to actually try out stuff that you don't know what will happen with, simply to learn and be open towards exploring new stuff and also raising the bar really for what is potentially achievable. I think within the finance sector, it's very much about upgrading the core. It's very much about the digital transformation, which is applying artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., to become ever more efficient, to learn how to automate, to create ever more customizable customer experiences. That is the number one thing. So in some senses, not a lot is changing. I think change is coming slow. And what I think is interesting is to look to some of the more fringe experiments that are being conducted right now to try and find new ways of optimizing investment strategies. The term singularity has been used in many different settings, right? But in generally speaking, when someone is talking about singularity, it's a critical point in time where we are moving into a radical new paradigm. And the most perhaps well-known version of singularity, other than the astrophysical one, is the point in time where machines become more intelligent than human beings.